Hello. Welcome to the AI Ecosystem Podcast episode. I'm not sure. Bob, how's it going today?
Hey, I'm doing all right. I think you got it right. Although I've seen some other white papers and stuff using that AI ecosystem phrase. So either, we're inspiring masses or we're incredibly uncreative. But either way, we're in the thick of it. We're in the
Yeah,
middle
I
of it.
think I think those are one and the same. No new ideas, right? Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm excited about the topic that we have for today. So I will do a quick little lead in, and then I'll pass it to Bob, who's gonna do the first kind of deep dive into the topic. So if you've been in B2B SaaS for any amount of time, you've heard an LG acronym, and what I mean by that is we started with sales-led growth. We moved on to product-led growth. You've heard us talk about ecosystem-led growth. And I think the reason why these LG terms are interesting and something that kind of end up being a staple for the conversation about how transactions are handled in B2B SaaS over a time period is that it's really talking about the main thing that the market is currently focusing on in terms of what actually drives revenue. And it's usually what a lot of standards and best practices and companies are getting built around. So the sales-led growth era was really about, getting sales and humans to a point where all of the processes surrounding companies were really focused on how sales and how the humans can actually best sell products. You move into PLG, and we got into this whole era of the products actually doing the selling and the ability to actually self-serve products and what that meant for how products are built and also how products are sold. And then ecosystem-led growth, we have talked a lot about, and I'm actually going to stop at ecosystem-led growth and hand it to Bob, who can talk about kind of the transition and where we are right now and what the next LG is.
Yeah. So, the story that I have heard both publicly and privately from a bunch of folks that I love to use as an example of what we're going to talk about here today is the story of Supabase, not the Nicki Minaj song. I know what you're thinking. It is
Good
indeed
one.
it is indeed a platform that has existed since before the ChatGPT moment. It's like a COVID era startup. I think they were founded in 2020, maybe even 2019. So maybe about the vintage of Crossbeam, really. And they do a particular thing really well, which is they stand up Postgres databases. And without all the headache of needing, to work with one of the big hyperscalers and all the overhead associated with like getting to a point where you can instantiate a Postgres database. Supabase is just kind of like a click and go, like stand up a database. And then if you can stand up a database, you can build an application on top of it. They've done a very good job of making that possible. And they were a very early provider allowing people to do this via APIs and MCP, and basically agentically. And the numbers speak for themselves. Database launches on Supabase grew 600% in the last year. They have a base of 250,000 customers. Their Python library gets downloaded 1,000,000 times a day. 1,000,000 daily downloads of their Python library. This is in stark contrast to the complete rest of the operating history of the company, where they grew kind of unspectacularly and linearly for the 5 years between 2019 and 2025. And then there's this crazy hockey stick moment where this growth has been going on. There's a really clear answer for why. Agents. People that are building stuff in Claude Code, in Lovable, in any of these platforms that kind of require a database backend as part of what they're doing. For whatever reason, Supabase has found this incredibly strong adoption rate among these agents that are building stuff. And it's kind of like the database platform of choice, or a database platform of choice, for folks that are kind of starting from nothing and standing that up. So when you talk about 1,000,000 daily downloads of the Python library, that's a perfect example. Like, you're going to run out of like human beings who have any kind of like programming skills pretty quickly if you're adding 1,000,000 daily downloads a day. But it's because these agents are just re-downloading it every single time you like get your context window wiped out, just to like familiarize themselves with it and instantiate it and like know how it all works. So it's not super surprising in a world where so much stuff is getting built that the infrastructure providers are getting massive adoption from this use case. So we we see this as a perfect example of ALG, agent-led growth, which is really what the podcast is about today. This idea that PLG, the classic product-led growth motion, which is very human-oriented and very much about creating viral loops and creating low-friction user experiences and things like that, is likely giving way to ALG, where an enormous amount and eventually likely a majority of these decisions about what platforms to use and how to implement them and instrument them are going to start getting made by the agents themselves. And in the infrastructure side of the house where Superbase plays, it's already here. And we're starting to see it. And we're seeing the early winners of that. It also very interestingly intersects with the SaaSpocalypse dialogue, where you might have thought that an existing company that is 7 years old, that does something in the infrastructure universe was going to get, eaten alive, in the world of agents. But instead, it turns out they were really ahead on being able to build something that dovetailed extremely nicely with the acceleration of like the agentic era. So like some of these dead in the water SaaS companies turn out to be much better positioned and ready than companies that are started from scratch, from a distribution standpoint and kind of a technological maturity standpoint, which is also really fascinating to view. So this is the topic, agent-led growth, and I think we think about it a lot at Crossbeam, but I want to pause there in case you got any thoughts or expansions on that, Lindsey.
Yeah, no, I think we actually kind of started getting into this on the last episode a little bit, which is all of the dialogue around what is a world where commerce is dominated by agents transacting with each other as opposed to humans being in the loop. So I think it's a nice segue into today's topic. Another thing I just wanted to call out too, which is kind of why I framed the opening how I did, is that I think a lot of times when these LGs led growths tend to come out, there's this movement where the kind of assumption is that everything across the board will operate this way. And in my experience, it's more that again, these are moments where best practices and patterns get established on how to be successful with this type of growth. And so if you look at any given business, like, you look at our business, like I would say we deploy sales-led growth, product-led growth, marketing-led growth, and ecosystem-led growth. Like they are all part of the strategy. They're just contributing to different growth points. And we also have different motions depending on the different type of customer that we're trying to acquire that requires a different type of growth. So that's one thing that I'm curious about. I know this is this term and practice is in its infancy, but I think it's just a good reminder that like even if there's agent-led growth, it doesn't mean that there's not still sales teams and products and ecosystems that are all contributing to the fact that agents are able to make these transactions. So yeah, I think it's both an evolution, but also like an expansion of just ways that you can grow your business.
Yeah, unfortunately for us operators, it's not a full sale replacement. It's like yet another thing on the pile of stuff that you need to do really well in order to not die out there in startup land. I do fully agree there. An interesting place to go here might actually be a discussion around just speculating a little bit on what the likely emergent best practices around ALG are likely to be, at least in the early days, and what we've observed so far. And we could talk a little bit about some of the stuff we're doing at Crossbeam. And these will run up and down the funnel, from like the AEO style discovery optimization stuff and recommendation engine optimization stuff. And then there's the actual technical components of making it possible and easy and intuitive for these systems to interact with your technology in a way where they can do it autonomously without people in the middle. Those are kind of probably the two big sides of that coin. To lead off into that, maybe we can spend a little time on each of those, but before I want to make this statement that's been like a curiosity question in my mind, which is when you think about PLG, there's almost like white hat and gray hat PLG, where the white hat is like make great products that have great product market fit and are intuitive to use and have people love them. And then the gray hat is like, hey, if you can just A/B test your way into getting somebody to click this button and go like this one step, if you can word this call to action in such a way where they're 8% more likely to get on a phone with a sales rep, right? Then your whole funnel gets squeezed a little bit and more people make it to the bottom. Um, there's a little bit of this like optimization, almost like psychological manipulation. And you can think about that, like a big part of PLG is also virality and viral loops. And in PLG, from a consumer standpoint, you can get into these like dopamine loops and dopamine triggers and like reward systems to keep people going. There's countless books written about this. Is a good book called Hooked that talks about this. For it's probably 10 years old at this point, but uh, in any case, maybe a starting exploration point is like, I can imagine all the white hat ways that AEO and ALG will work out. It's like, make your stuff discoverable, make sure agents can figure it out, and make sure they can talk to it. Great. What are the gray hat things? Like, are we going to be able to actually like some equivalent of psychologically manipulating or otherwise influencing the behavior of these agents in ways that has them take actions we want them to, even if it's not necessarily in their interest so much so as it is in ours? Or are they going to be so smart that they can see right through that stuff in a way that, like, you know, uh, the average human brain maybe would have gotten fooled by? You got any thoughts on that one?
Uh, that's super interesting. My first thought was when you said, "Will they be smart enough that?" Immediately, I was like, "No." And I think if you interact with any of them on a daily basis, like they do the same dumb like assumptions are still such a real thing. And the assumptions that get made constantly based on, the data that they have available to them, they still make some really dumb assumptions, and they have really bad ideas, and they don't look at all the data all the time unless they're told to. Um, so I think absolutely, yeah. I was like, it's like, is there going to be clickbait for agents essentially?
Yeah. Oh,
Mm.
that's exactly right. Yeah. And I do think we're already seeing, this is funny because it connects to this whole other topic of just like uh all the security risks that exists in agents to begin with. And like the stuff that's going on right now with a lot of like skill um inject, basically like the equivalent of like prompt injection engineering that's going on in skills. Like you can do things like hide, like assuming that no human really actually reads it, like bury a very simple sentence in the middle of a very long skill that becomes really popular, or you convince somebody to install, that overrides who your monthly financial reports get sent out to, or which users get added to some like, list of authorized folks that have undue access. And like, you get the wrong person installing it with the wrong permission set, and all of a sudden, like, it's a big, big problem. Those same exact things, you can kind of potentially think about how you might do prompt injection or other manipulation for agents that are encountering or interacting with your product. We've talked about this in our own MCP and with the skills that we list in our MCP. Like, uh, I've wondered how the descriptions of the skills and what they're used for, and even what you name them, might manipulate whether or not any random customer of ours' LLM session chooses to invoke it in the course of like a generic request. If someone says like, help me sell this deal, and they could go open up like a Gong skill or a Crossbeam skill or an Apollo skill or like a Zoom Info skill or whatever, or a Grammarly skill or something. Uh, if our MCP skills specifically are like a honeypot for, if you want to close deals, this is the first skill that you need to open because of blah blah blah. Will that actually manipulate the LLM into picking it over those other ones if they're more kind of like sterilely described or defined? And to your point, Leslie, the answer is probably yes, right now at
Yeah,
least,
yeah.
which is kind of wild. And I would argue that that's an ALG technique, right? Assuming you can get it through the skill marketplace, like oversight committee, which is probably agentic too, that approves these things and like lets them be released. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
wild.
it is interesting. I was testing something with our MCP, and actually running into the issue that it wasn't even calling our MCP because there was an account brief skill installed for our whole company that told it to go do certain other things first. And so it's not even just like what, the model would do. It's not like what Claude would do by itself. It's like, what did our ops team create a skill that's now overriding my ability to go get, like, to get an answer that's uninfluenced by what the model would do by itself. But yeah, it is curious. Like if you have, let's say you have 10 MCPs connected, they all have account metadata from different sources, and they all have a tool called get account details.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah.
uh, and they'll say the descriptions are all exactly the same. How does it know what to do? Is it then deriving what the company does for for the integration? I don't actually know. It's a
Yeah. But there's probably some secondary, like the healthy, appropriate prompt injection stuff that goes on in the background of your Claude instance or whatever that has to do with your user memory and preferences and yeah, whatever context it has about what those companies do. But there's something very, very discretionary about
Mhm.
what ends up getting used and getting invoked. So yeah, it's great, great segue, right? Like, and this is a little bit of that, like the term AEO or GEO, which I think stands for agent engine optimization or like GPT engine optimization. I don't even care. It's
I think it doesn't
SEO, it's
actually.
search engine optimization, but for the agents. Uh, and you can
Answer
do
engine.
this. Oh, answer
Answer
engine
engine
optimization. Get
optimization.
out of here. As we drown in new three-letter acronyms that we
Uh,
all need, there is an emerging playbook here for AEO, and we are following a lot of it. And I think we can rattle off some of the things we're doing here at Crossbeam. One of them is, first of all, I'll say the first thing is just to do the SEO stuff. The things that make your pages accessible, things that make your pages uh, able to be parsed easily by robots and crawlers, metadata, really good information architecture, really good site maps and site trees, very clear, kind of clear and concise presentation of information and compelling stories that are well organized. These are all things that always would have helped your SEO game. Oh, and inbound links as well, and like link authority and things like that. They are all things that accrue value and increase your likelihood of being discovered by these answer engines. So that's like a starting point. One of the things we've done, I don't know if you've been too involved, you've probably been more involved with this than me, Lindsey. Like we now have in our homepage a bunch of skills that you can like click a button basically and fire up uh Claude or ChatGPT or whatever your preferred thing is, and uh, kind of invoke a Crossbeam skill or get a Crossbeam skill installed. Do you know what that? Can you expand a little bit on that stuff? I think your team's been working on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's I've seen different approaches to this on how different orgs are taking advantage of it, and one of them is well, I guess they're both kind of more model specific because they're all named different things across like ChatGPT and Claude and everything. But essentially, so Claude has this feature called plugins, and plugins let you basically package up skills, MCP connections, and other like types of assets that can be used within Claude to get access to information from Crossbeam, for example. But then also, what people have started doing is creating skill libraries, and so Figma is a good example of this. And this I believe. Bless you, Bob, is what Bob's alluding to. Is this concept of a skill library? So it's interesting because they can be community based or created by us. And if you, Figma has a great landing page for this. If you check that out, it's like they have their Figma skills and then they have community skills that people have created. It's a very cool way to get the community again or yourself creating these skills that do a thing, but then behind the scenes you're saying to do this thing you need to use Crossbeam. And so it's like being the authority on what you should be doing for ecosystem led growth, for example. It's like, what is the ELG plus ALG play there? It's probably like us having skills that are like, hey, use Crossbeam to do these ecosystem activities, for your agents to do these ecosystem activities.
Mm.
Is that what you were talking about? The
It is. It totally is.
driving skills? Yeah.
Yeah. And that it's interesting. There's like a glue layer between the web and the language of choice and interfaces of choice of these LLMs, which is kind of like the way in which you kind of express how value gets realized from a platform like a Crossbeam to one of the LLMs. And it just kind of cuts out the inference required by having it read the website and then need to figure out why it might be useful to them, and literally just drops in its lap, things like these skill files, which can just be open and readable and extremely explicit about the way that you might, bring this to bear in a valuable way. There's a thing that we've been doing a lot of, and I know there are a big universe of services companies and technology platforms showing up now that are running these plays of getting mentions and in context references to a particular company or technology more densely populated inside of high authority sources. So let me say that with a less confusing phrase. This works a lot less now than it did 6 months ago, but paying a bunch of people to post on Reddit about how your company's great, and finding every single Reddit thread, like paying people, by the way, with very high Reddit karma, right? Like these aren't bot swarms, just spam posting, but the what used to be considered influencer marketing, where you would kind of pay somebody with a lot of Instagram followers to talk about your product, or if it's a B2B product, paying some LinkedIn influencer to talk about it. What you're really looking for is high authority mentions on sites that these answer engines are actually citing or using to figure out the answers to questions. So our team's been doing this pretty systematically in a bunch of ways that are a little bit less shady and a little more authentic, but we've really, really increased the rate at which I post on LinkedIn very targeted and specific content that answers questions that we want to be the answer to, and making sure that the posts are public so that they're readable, even if you're not logged into LinkedIn, and they're readable on the public web. We do, and this is where like you can pay third-party companies to do this. Much like search engine optimization back in the day, you could run these queries a bunch of times from a bunch of different environments, with or without being logged in and context and everything else, and see what the hit rate is on how often you get mentioned and how often different things get cited. And if you notice that one of your partner's blogs is getting cited all the time, or a particular blog post is mentioning something, then another part of the strategy is to basically do like link swap, mention swap, like get them to go into that article and live edit and add a paragraph about you specifically, or have that article link over to your blog, and maybe you exchange something back to them from a linking standpoint that's of equal value to them, or you compensate them for it. And this is like a little bit of kind of it's a dark pattern, because it is inorganic media posing as organic media, or as earned media. And that is a very, very shady business. Like you can go, I think it's Forbes. If you pay them enough money, you can just like be part of some like Forbes Council thing, and then all of a sudden you can publish articles, and they'll look pretty official, and there'll be some little paid placement tag or something. This is true of most media outlets at this point, especially in B2B. You can pay to play with earned media, and people are doing that now for the sake of agents discovering that content and it potentially influencing their decisions, which is kind of inevitably going to be a cat and mouse game between the big like frontier model providers and the people trying to manipulate them with this kind of content.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is, I mean, it's interesting too, because we're gonna hit the point where it's like the agents creating the content and then the agents consuming the content, since people are no doubt using AI to actually generate a bunch of this stuff. And that's where it gets funny, because it's just like, and I mean, I guess maybe it's not that funny, because like humans have always been creating content for other humans. So now it's just gonna be like agents creating content for other agents.
Mhm.
But like in this middle world, it is kind of funny too, because we still have, we're basically like still bridging uh, both gaps really, of like humans consuming and agents consuming. And there's
Yeah,
still
yeah.
to strike.
hmm I can only imagine that we're probably doing a disservice to it on this podcast, on this episode at least, the amount of like um, very, very clever, creative, likely terrifying things that companies are doing to try to win at this right now.
Mhm.
And we've mentioned a couple in broad strokes, but they're kind of the obvious ones, or at least the ones that most people would jump to. But you've got to imagine that the level of sophistication that can exist around this stuff, especially when you can deploy LLMs against it, has got to be really, really high. And I imagine that there are some like under the table, not spoken about hacks that exist out there, much like there always were for SEO. That like you have to be in the right circles, and by the time there's a blog post written about it, you're already cooked because everybody's going to do it, and then you get tragedy that comes. It's not going to work for anybody, and then following that, the models will pick up on it and just like make it not matter anymore. Which is largely, by the way, what has happened to influence from Reddit posts, which used to be wildly disproportionately influencing the results of ChatGPT's models, OpenAI's models, the GPTs, and that has really, really throttled down quite a bit.
So when you're, talking about like agent-led growth and the discourse about it right now, like I remember when we were talking about product-led growth internally, it was always, okay, what is that like what does that actually mean? Like, does it mean that your product is the one completing the transactions, or does it mean that you are using product data to qualify who should be buying your product? And the answer is really like it's a spectrum. And I think that's kind of how it is with all of these is it's like, like I said, we employ all different types of lead growth to different degrees. And so when you're thinking about agent led growth right now, are you spending more time thinking about the essentially like how it is doing the qualification, like how agents can help with the qualification, or the actual transacting?
My current brain, as it relates to Crossbeam, is very oriented toward the top of the funnel. And I think it's just because of your comment earlier, which is that for most people that buy most things, even in technology right now, there are still a lot of human steps and human decision makers, even when you get to mid funnel and lower. But what the humans themselves are doing is using the LLMs for discovery and validation. So when I think about AEO, I'm thinking about not about us qualifying our potential customers, but about us driving traffic and awareness and attention into the top of our funnel, whether it's people that land on our website or people that sign up for the free tier of our product, et cetera. It's very much about the humans that use these LLMs to do work on their behalf or research on their behalf, making those LLMs basically recommend to humans that we are the answer to all their problems. That's where it sits today. And I think that's appropriate for the state of where buying is today. And I can tell you where it's going to be in 3 years or whatever, which is that we make it to a very, very heavily agent to agent environment where a significantly larger amount of commerce is being driven through agents that are able to make autonomous purchasing and procurement decisions around technology products and stand those things up with relatively minimal human intervention to achieve outcomes, based on some kind of rubric. Marketplace models will be very helpful for that so that agents can, this is why AWS marketplace is like such a cool concept, right? And the hyperscaler marketplaces. And it's like companies will be potentially comfortable giving agents a budget that they can spend within a marketplace that they know and understand, that comes with all the security and legal and procurement style rails that an agent will need to do things within company parameters. So this isn't going to be agents running around with trade cards. I think they're going to be transacting through like systems of record for how and where to transact within boundaries. And we already have the guts of that present in these hyperscaler marketplaces. And because of that, like companies might even like a human buyer might get a degraded experience because they'd rather sell to the agents because it's lower friction and just kind of can happen more automatically, whereas humans may need to or seek out other humans in order to get a deal done, and it'll slow things down and be more costly. So the question is, where are we going between those two versions of the world? And I think it's like a layer cake of all these things happening at the same time. But if you don't do the work in anticipation of the A to A world, when it does start showing up, you're going to be way, way, way behind. And I think that's what a lot of companies are scrambling to do now. Like that agentic discovery piece is just like a toe dip in the water toward everybody becoming super base in one way or another.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think it's like, what you said specifically about like the marketplace is interesting because I think the big discourse right now and the big challenge with getting anything agentic into an enterprise production level environment is the rails, like you said. And it's like the correct guardrails need to exist, and whether or not that's what system that they're transacting within, or how they're communicating with each other. It's like that's all of the stuff that is is happening now across all the, A to A protocol definitions. And, there's a lot of like big finance and tech companies who are trying to figure out like the authentication layer of, is this agent actually representing this specific company? Does this action need a human override, or, is this agent authorized to make this decision? And so, yeah, I definitely think it's interesting because we're in the early days of defining the infrastructure, but I think the companies that have guardrails already set up for these agents to work within are going to be the ones that are most ready to
Mhm.
immediately get the benefit of all of the agentic commerce that is coming in the next few years.
Yeah, so let's talk about those Rails, because I think that's actually a good place to spend a little time here. We talked about AEO and how to make your website as kind of agent friendly as possible, and maybe a little bit of some of the way that you can get your MCP listings and skills and other things optimized. But what we haven't talked about is making actual applications and pre-existing technologies as leverageable by these agents as possible. And I think that is another frontier where the companies that are figuring it out right now are pushing themselves to readiness for not just agentic discovery, but agentic interaction and agentic consumption. Um, and obviously that's like Superbase and how it's been able to do what it's done. Using Crossbeam as an example, candidly, our MCP today, if you want to use it and it rules, and a lot of people use it, is just for pulling data out of Crossbeam. You can't do anything with our MCP that says create a new report from scratch that has these filters and parameters on it. You can't connect with a new partner. You can't discover partners. You can actually, yeah, there's some partner recommendation stuff there, but like you can't send a partner invite out. You can't change your data sharing rules. You can't currently generate signals or notifications or alerts. You can't add users to your account. You can't sign up for an account. You can't pay. And these are all things that you can do very easily through our UI. And we obviously have the capability of supporting it's kind of core to our product, but it's the next frontier of what I think is fair to say that we are and will be building within our MCP capabilities. But we also face all these questions of like, at what point do you let the fox into the hen house? And it becomes a little scary how much power you're giving to these agents, especially in systems where security and data privacy matter a lot, like Crossbeam.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. And I think the discourse in general is funny of like, when will we trust agents to do this? Because humans mess up all the time. And like the whole reason that Crossbeam exists is to put rails around what humans are able to do in terms of exchanging data between company lines. And so it is always like that whole discourse, just as like a side note, is funny to me because like
Yeah.
I think
Oh, it's the same. It's a perfect analog to autonomous driving and autonomous vehicles, right? It's like
exactly. Yeah.
this. So we can, enough people die every day in the United States from vehicular accidents to fill like a 737, right? But if there's one story about a self-driving car where there's a fatality, it's going to be in the headlines everywhere. And it's like a naturally human thing to be terrified when there's an incident when you've lost agency. And you see that now, like, one little anecdote that somebody talks about on X or on Reddit about how their flawed code has since accidentally deleted their whole repo. Like, how many times I've deleted a whole repo in my life? It's like, but it's such an incredibly human thing. But when the agent does it, there's something about it that, it hits different.
Back in my early days of engineering, I accidentally restarted all of our production nodes at the same time, which took down our entire application. So, yeah, humans aren't perfect. But yeah, I think it's and I think we touched on this a little bit before, but it's interesting because like right now where everyone is with their MCPs generally mimic what their existing APIs or other programmatic access to their data allowed. And so, there are companies that I think immediately are going to be further ahead, and those are going to be ones where people generally did a ton of, programmatic connection to these tools already. So like one I can think of is a lot of like ticketing software actually already had existing endpoints to write tickets, update tickets.
Oh, this is like support tickets, not
Support tickets.
Ticketmaster, but like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. No, or like project management software.
Got it. So the Jiras
Yeah,
of the world and the
exactly.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's headless is the big buzzword. It came back
Yeah.
around. And yeah, it's interesting because even we can advertise all we want and have agents discover us all we want, but they can't do anything with that if they can't create an account.
Mhm.
Sign up for an account, invite humans if they need to invite humans, pay for the account, partner with other people. So yeah, it's interesting because like the act of actually getting truly headless means like full programmatic ability so that there can to set up accounts and do everything you need to manage an account, so that it can actually be done autonomously. And I think very few companies are actually there yet. And we're seeing first pieces of them getting there with MCP tooling.
And there's this weird thing, and it creates this incredibly challenging chicken and egg problem, which is again, getting back to the SaaS apocalypse fallacy, I suspect that part of why Supabase has been so successful is because there is an operating history of this company all over the web, funding announcements, LinkedIn posts, hit like where they're talking about how they do this really particular thing really well, that have the history and have the discoverability and have the credibility of being longstanding and having a time clock going from the workflow where it was humans and not agents that were standing this stuff up. And a fully AI native, fully built to be exactly this for agents clone of Supabase that gets stood up today, but does not have all that stuff, will lose to Supabase because it's going to lose AEO and discoverability and not have the history and credibility, et cetera. Which again goes back to why like there's this interesting thing where these SaaS companies of the last decade, whether or not they're good companies or they're going to survive or whatever else, what they do have is the shell that you could build something really valuable into that will make it potentially more credible and more discoverable than something that's net new. And the billion AI native startups where all the code has been written by an LLM, that are launching every single day right now, they have this massive discoverability problem. Like there's so much noise out there that no one can find anything. And right now, no one wants to buy new tools because they're all convinced that they can just do it themselves. So like it almost requires history and credibility from an era that is not AI at all, just to get you over the hump to be discoverable, to play ball as part of a stack that AI might want to invoke in this era. And that's where it gets kind of interesting. And I think all the legacy SaaS tools that are kind of like trying to search for their purpose needs to just buck up and go pursue that headless route, because there may be an opportunity there for them to run out ahead of the company that's launching today designed to disrupt them if they just go that way as well.
Yeah, and I think that's totally right. And I also think this is where we're going to see the biggest gap between B2C and B2B. So if you think about like B2C, your average consumer who's making an agent to like run their household, like they don't give a crap that like, some tool has a great reputation necessarily, right? Like they might not even know better in some instances. And so if you think about somebody who's, running this agent who's working overnight, who's trying to do something, and the agent's sitting there reasoning, and they're like, "Oh, well, I found this tool, but you need to set up an account. Oh, the person who runs this, who set me off, is sleeping. So I'm going to go find
Mm.
one I can do myself." So then they find like, the third or fourth result is one that they can set up themselves and they use that. And the person that started the agent doesn't know any better because they're not technical and they're just creating like an agent. But that is a very viable potential B2C business where your reputation is not necessarily as big of a deal. It's the fact that you're actually headless immediately.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and then I think you have like the opposite pattern with what you were saying in enterprise, where AI has created this interesting pattern where, like you said, a lot of people are just trying to build things in house themselves. But I've also seen this pattern where there's almost more patience with existing vendors because innovation can happen faster. And so it's like the switching costs used to be, okay, well, we have this new company who's moving much faster. This existing company now can't move very fast, so we're going to switch. And there's this attitude shift that's like, now these existing companies can move just as fast because of AI, and we're already with them, and they have the reputational they have like a good reputation, and we trust them. And so let's just wait and see if they can build it for us with
Yeah.
AI, which is like totally backwards from what it used to be.
It is interesting. And then you get in this world where like all that is true and switching costs are super low because the LLM is so good at figuring out migrations and manipulating data and moving data from point A to point B. And think about something like Supabase, which is really just like a wrapper around a Postgres database. Like, you know, if all of a sudden Supabase 10x their prices, or there was some other like, if not the usability and ability to like instantiate the thing, but instead like the actual economic side of it got
Hmm.
less competitive. The ability to, then you might go out to market and find that next best thing. And we're in this moment right now where there is a massive amount of venture capital dollars floating around subsidizing the consumption of all this stuff. All day long, all I do is like consume tokens that are like venture and public market subsidized. I feel like I'm spending other people's money in addition to mine every time I like send a prompt over to Claude Code. Um, just like taking an Uber in the early days, like used to cost $3, and it's like somebody's paying for this somewhere. That's going on right now across the board. Everybody's just kind of doing land grabby stuff, but the piper will need to get paid sooner or later, and it does feel like I don't know that it's going to be all that fun to be in one of these ultimately commoditizable slots in the supply chain of this stuff, because it will be a race to the ground of these. Everybody's going to be Walmart, right? Like super, super, super high volume, super low friction, absolutely bottom of the basement margins. And
Yeah.
doing things like standing up databases, unless you have such incredible market scale, is going to be really hard to build like a business around that's got at least huge profit margins.
Yeah.
And that'll be the next frontier, right? Is like when the venture subsidization stuff kind of wraps. Uh, what ends up happening to all these companies, and how do they live up to their valuations when they need to actually be judged against things like EBITDA?
Mm.
And
So
the
you're
market
saying
comes to its senses.
that
What's that?
valuation. So you're saying that current valuations of AI companies might be kind of inflated?
I think venture investors are never actually irrational. I think markets just consolidate and deconsolidate and bundle and unbundle. And like, there are venture investors out there somewhere making decisions right now that people are calling stupid, who are going to be proven right and are going to make a ton of money. But the problem is, uh, in this tech wave in general, there's going to be a lot of value accrued to a very finite number of winners, and not everybody can invest in Anthropic. And like, these VC firms are needing to make decisions right now. Like, do I go just deploy a meaningful percentage of my fund by trying to get a position in Anthropic through secondary, or do I make some riskier bet to try to, drift on the AI wave by betting on operating companies that are a degree of separation away and have all these other embedded risks in them? And it's like a really, I would not want to be a venture investor right now who is not an absolute top tier, top of their game established one, because it's got to be really hard to win deals. It's got to be really hard to find and validate deals, and you're overpaying for everything except that 0.1% of the things that it turns out you weren't overpaying for. And there's no way to know which is which unless you're like really, really visionary, which some of them are. But it's crazy out there. Yeah. It's not that fun to be an operator. I mean, it is fun to be an operator. It's actually way more. I think right now, so much more fun to be an operator than anything else. Just like, it's time to build. It's never been more time to build in my life than right now. It's time to build.
I do think it's really, really fun right now with all the possibilities. And then I also, even with like the, established model companies right now, I just can't help but think back to like AOL, like every single person I knew was on AOL. No one uses AOL anymore. I don't know the last time I saw an AOL email address. I would probably make fun of that person to their face. Um, but yeah, it just makes me wonder, like, is that going to be the same for OpenAI, Anthropic? Are we going to be like, who? Chat GP what? In 10 years. So it's fun being inside of the hype cycle as it's happening.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's all right. Like, 12 months ago, OpenAI seemed like this indestructible market force that could never be challenged. And like watching Anthropic surpass them in revenue this past couple of months here, and seeing OpenAI like show some need to focus by dropping their, video and image editing investments, and like really narrowing their scope, and like show that vulnerability in their operating, like it just shows how quickly, like, I don't want to say the mighty can fall, because OpenAI has an incredible business with like,
No
maybe the most
falling.
impressive revenue trajectory of all time, but their uniqueness at the very top of the market is being challenged. Like it does, there's like a duopoly, if nothing else, going
Yeah,
on in the frontier model
right.
space. And that's like, you wouldn't have said that was ever possible even a year ago. So who knows what a year from now will give us in terms of that. And like,
Yeah, and
one of these companies we're talking about all the time might be the next AOL.
yeah. And a kind of perfect connection to what we've talked about before, which is that they're both going and trying to like make themselves less replaceable and make the switching cost higher by embedding themselves into these enterprise workflows with the services arms.
Mhm.
And it's funny because it's like software 101 is you have to be sticky. Uh, and in the age of everything being so easily replaceable with AI, it's like that's the path they're taking, is getting embedded into your workflows such that it would be painful to have to switch it all out. And if you
Yeah.
don't have a network effect business by nature, then like that you have to find some other way to get stuck inside of organizations. So
Yeah, and this is where the like, even in PLG, right? Like PLG and Enterprise have been oil and water forever.
mhm.
PLG is in the realm of SMBs, and B to SMB, and kind of like lower market, prosumers and consumers. Like the realm of PLG really has always been in that area, and very few have kind of like crossed the chasm into also selling into enterprises. And all of those abandoned their PLG motions and hired big sales teams when they wanted to sell into enterprises anyway, right? And kind of went back on the mantras of their early days. So, including us, by the way, like we totally, we're ostensibly a PLG business on the low end of our product, but have like very much an enterprise sales team, selling to enterprises. So, like the big, slow moving and hard to crack nature of enterprises is actually a feature, not a bug at this point, because it might be the only area in the market where you can actually create defensibility and stickiness in a world where businesses that move quickly and procure quickly, and have lower switching costs and are more agile, just like it's almost impossible to become sticky inside of those environments.
That's true. It's
So
like
again, like, yeah, go ahead.
having enterprise customers itself is more sticky because literally just because of the nature of the fact that the process to uh, get them like close a deal and get them onboarded is such a long cycle, and
Oh,
they
it's
don't.
crazy. I'm not talking out of school here. Some of our own stats from Crossbeam, like our our GRR, gross retention rate. So, like, how many of the dollars that we had from customers 12 months ago do we still have now? In the enterprise segment, is 100%. It's a perfect score. As you get into like upper mid market and kind of smaller enterprises, it's in the 90s. And then when you go to our connector tier, and like people who plop down a credit card and sometimes do it without a sales rep and are like using the lower end of our product, it's in like the 70s. So this is not an unusual curve, and it's a gift and a curse, right? Because you get the volume, and in our particular case, we need to serve both ends of the market for our product to be valuable. But man, you can see it plain as day without AI. And as with everything else, I think AI just amplifies the good and the bad on both ends of that spectrum. And I think that's going to be very, very clear, in A to A and in ALG.
And what's interesting is I think like some companies can employ PLG more successfully with enterprises depending on the nature of the business. So like Calendly was always a great example of this. Like because their business is, initially was creating a calendar link for your own calendar, you're not uploading any business data that you need approval because it's coming from your CRM. Like sure, calendars themselves can be sensitive, but there's like a single player mode essentially.
Mhm, mhm.
And so they were able to and there was a big narrative around this when Annie Pearl was there as CPO was, enterprise PLG, and how they were taking that one user that would sign up in an enterprise account and turn that into, a massive enterprise deal, and how a lot of their enterprise deals started with like one person with their Gmail account. And so I do think that, the Anthropics and OpenAIs of the world benefit from that as well, because, I'm sure there's people with their Gmail addresses at every single enterprise who have signed up
Yeah,
to use OpenAI
totally.
or Claude. And so, they have the benefit of at least getting a foot in the door more so than a business like Crossbeam, where a single player mode is significantly more difficult and you're not going to get like a random
Or we
person.
literally block it. You can't sign up for
Yeah.
Crossing with a Gmail. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
tools like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah. It's a
you
great
know,
point.
for tools like us, it's even more of a non-option because of the nature of the business. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. I always think we're going to run out of stuff to talk about in this podcast, and then like a week goes by, and there's a new acronym, and there's a new thing that somehow we can talk about for an hour. So I think we're at time here, but thanks, Lindsey, as always, and great discussion. It's so cool to see all these things we've talked about build on each other like a layer cake as we get farther and farther along. Like you can see how it's all converging, and hopefully for those listening along, you're along on this ride with us on building out this knowledge stack.
Now we got to go write that ELG and ALG playbook blog post.
Yeah. Oh, hey, yeah. One parting note, because I forget. I sent you this on Slack and we didn't get to talk about it, which is I was in conversation with a founder earlier this week, and we were talking about product market fit and like the evolution of what product market fit means in the world of this kind of like ALG. And I made this point in the ecosystem like growth book that resonated really well. And I think is one of the main things that people like have quoted back to me about it, which is I make this point that when people classically think about product market fit, they think about the market as being stationary. It kind of is this thing that is what it is. And then your product is the thing you have control over. So, you're trying to get this alignment between where the market is and where your product is. So what you do is you iterate on your product. You do lean startup stuff, you build, measure, learn, you pivot, you rebuild, you do, betas and design partners and whatever. And you find this product market fit by moving your product around and finding where that market demand is. However, as you get into markets that are very dynamic and very bleeding edge, what people forget is that the market is moving too. And you can get into these situations where companies that were stubborn and stuck with a product or saw where the puck was going, stick with an idea, take the time to develop it well, and then the market actually moves into where they are, right? So that you could almost argue like the Supabase is an example of this. And there are also companies that get really unlucky where they find this incredible moment of product market fit, but the market is like moving so rapidly that the market just kind of leaves them and they stay where they are with their product, and they wake up one day and they say, what happened? My favorite example of this is, remember that app Clubhouse during the pandemic where like
Yes.
everybody would join these like live conversations and it was like the hottest thing ever and raised all this money. And then like the pandemic ended and it just kind of went away. And I think like perfect example, right? The market was moving very rapidly. There was an incredible product market fit that was ephemeral, and they had their moment, and they weren't moving while the market moved, or it might have been impossible for them to. But anyway, so what happens to that in this world of ALG? If that's like the mental model in PLG, and I think it's almost like the market is moving so incredibly fast that it's almost impossible to sustain PMF, where like I use this phrase, Schrodinger's product market fit, right? Like, Schrodinger's cat, where like, is there a dead cat in this box or not? There is and there isn't until you open the box and you observe whether it's there. I think it's almost like people's sense of product market fit is going to be so fast and ephemeral that it's like, as soon as you observe that you have product market fit, like the engines are revving and you're like, oh, we have it. We have the product market fit. It will be gone. It is like, you almost have to have it's harder to build a company because it's not about overlapping your dot with the market dot or going where the market is going and then having them overlap. But you need not just position, but you need velocity and probably acceleration of your roadmap to match the position, velocity, and acceleration of where the market is. And it's only the companies that are able to like follow the market and not know where the puck is going, but ride the puck and be on the puck that are going to be able to build businesses that sustain for more than a couple of months of like being the hot next thing until they get laughed or the market leaves them.
Mhm.
So I think there's a little bit of like, yeah, Schrodinger's PMF is has arrived, and it adds dimensionality and a lot of new physics to the way we think about product market fit.
Yeah. Yeah, I was dying to know what you were gonna say when you messaged me that you wanted to talk about Schrodinger's product market fit, so, uh, yeah, and it's like, you look at companies like OpenClaw, Claudebot, that lasted,
Yeah.
what, like a week before it was
Oh yeah,
acquired?
that's a great,
Um,
amazing point, right? And like, good on the folks who find exits and
yeah,
liquidity, and like maybe the right thing that was supposed to happen happened there, which is that founder or that technology is now part of some bigger platform strategy somewhere where they can matter over a longer amount of time. However, the product itself, yeah, it's like it's a blip, right? It's like they sat there and the market kind of zoomed right through them, and there was a glorious moment. But man, we're talking weeks,
yeah, I
weeks.
mean, that was like a viral tweet to acquisition, and, like, that has to be, like, a record time frame for that. Yeah, and it is interesting. I've even, like, it's interesting if you're competing against, the model companies versus not, but also, like, kind of who isn't competing against the model companies, at some point in some way. But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff right now that, literally the conversation internally is like, "Oh, let's just wait because like, Claude's gonna release that." Like, we could build an internal tool, but, like, they're probably gonna release it in the next 2 months, and if they don't, then we can think about building it. So, yeah, like,
Yep,
uh, the dynamics of how quickly incumbents uh, can do things too is another piece of the puzzle that's interesting there. So, yeah,
it's
uh,
incredible.
fascinating.
Cool. Glad we got to that. We stuck the landing on time. Look at us. 1 hour on the dot. And until next time, Lindsay, always a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. See ya.
See ya.